Hands where I can see them! Now! The shout tore through the calm of Lincoln Park like a rip in fabric. Officer Ryan Caldwell's voice cracked with tension, his finger hovering near the trigger. Morning mist curled around his patrol car, and the echo of his command bounced off red brick walls and empty sidewalks. For a split second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Across from him stood a man with a camera, still, steady, expression unreadable. That man was Marcus Ellis, in his right hand. A small silver badge caught a sliver of pale sunlight. Before going into this story, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And if stories about truth, justice, and second chances mean something to you, subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It helps more people hear stories that matter. Now, let's return to Chicago. On that quiet Wednesday morning, at 7:15 a.m., Lincoln Park was half awake. Coffee shops were just opening. Joggers passed with earbuds in, and the lake breeze carried a faint chill through the trees. Marcus Ellis adjusted his camera lens, steadying it against a lamppost. His eyes traced the police cruiser parked across from him, its hood reflecting soft fog. He wasn't sightseeing. He was collecting evidence, part of a quiet federal probe into payoffs between certain Chicago officers and a crew linked to the old Italian mob. For weeks, he'd been documenting routine misconduct, cars parked where they shouldn't be, badges shown in exchange for envelopes, and the same names surfacing on both sides of the law. Ellis moved carefully, his every step deliberate. Years of field work and 2 tours in Iraq had trained him to read danger before it spoke. His instincts told him today was wrong. Something about the empty street, the faint radio buzz from inside the cruiser, and the sensation that he was being watched. He kept his camera low, snapped one last shot, and turned to leave. That's when Officer Ryan Caldwell pulled up. Caldwell was 25, too young to sound as old as he did when he barked. "Hey, step away from that vehicle!" He'd been on solo patrol for 3 weeks, still chasing approval from superiors who rarely noticed him. His father, a disgraced officer fired for brutality in the 90s, still lingered in his head. Never hesitate. Son, if you blink, you die. Ryan lived by it. He didn't see a man with a camera, he saw a test of control. Clara Benson, watering geraniums from her balcony, paused mid-pour. She recognized the tone in Caldwell's voice. It wasn't authority. It was fear, dressed as command. She lowered her watering can, eyes narrowing. Marcus raised a calm hand. "Officer, my name is Marcus Ellis. I'm with the Bureau." He reached slowly into his coat and revealed his badge, the gold crest of the FBI gleaming faintly in the mist. Caldwell's heart slammed against his ribs. "Nice try," he said. "eBay sells those now." The tension thickened. Marcus exhaled. "You're making a mistake." Caldwell's thumb brushed the safety of his gun. Every nerve screamed that this was the moment to act first. He'd been warned about federal investigations sniffing around CPD precincts, rumors of internal leaks, of officers being shadowed. His chest tightened, breath shallow. "Hands on the hood," he ordered. Marcus didn't move. "You're pointing a weapon at a federal agent. You need to lower it." For a moment, only the hum of the cruiser filled the silence. Caldwell's mind flashed back to his father pacing their kitchen years ago, voice low and bitter. A good cop doesn't wait for permission. Ryan lifted his chin, trying to sound steady. "Last chance?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm not resisting," he said quietly. "I'm refusing an illegal order." The words landed like sparks in dry grass. Caldwell's face hardened. In his mind, defiance confirmed guilt. He stepped closer. Gun raised, baton clutched in his left hand. Clara Benson's hand trembled as she reached for her iPhone. Her husband had been a cop once, back when the department still knew her name. She hit record. "Sir," Marcus said evenly. "You're escalating a situation that doesn't need to exist." "On your knees!" Caldwell shouted. His voice cracked again. Marcus didn't kneel. Instead, he tapped his Apple Watch twice, an emergency trigger that silently pinged the FBI dispatch center. Caldwell noticed the motion and lunged forward. "Don't you move!" A loud metallic click echoed down the street, the unmistakable sound of a gun chambering a round. Clara gasped. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Caldwell's breath came fast now. He didn't see a badge or an agent, just another potential threat, another chance to prove he wasn't weak. The words of his training officer, Derek Hale, replayed in his head. "If in doubt, act first, apologize later." Marcus raised his hands, palms open. "You don't want to do this." But Ryan Caldwell already had. The shot rang out like a thunderclap. It tore through the morning air, bounced off brick and metal, and sent pigeons scattering from a nearby rooftop. The bullet hit a light pole, splintering off harmlessly, but the sound froze every soul within earshot. Clara's phone trembled in her grip. She whispered, "Oh, dear God!" Caldwell's hands shook. For a fraction of a second, he realized what he'd done. The world slowed. The mist thickened. Marcus stood still, eyes wide but unflinching. Then came the radio chatter. Caldwell's shoulder mic hissed alive. Dispatch requesting his location. His voice cracked as he responded. "Officer needs backup. Possible suspect with a weapon." He lied. Within minutes. Sirens wailed from 2 blocks away. Marcus took a cautious step back. His voice steady but edged with disbelief. "You just called in a false report." "Don't talk," Caldwell said. "Turn around." "I'm not your suspect," Marcus replied. "And you just made yourself one." For the first time. Doubt flickered in Caldwell's eyes. His training had never covered this. How to face a mistake too big to undo. Clara's recording continued to capture every second. The fog, the gun, the trembling hands, the moment where authority turned into fear. By the time the first responding unit arrived, the scene looked deceptively calm. 2 men standing in the middle of the street, one holding a gun, the other holding his ground. But beneath that silence, the fuse was already lit. That morning would be replayed on millions of screens within hours. The video would spark outrage, protests, and a reckoning that no one in the Chicago Police Department could contain. But in that fragile moment, before the hashtags, before the lawsuits, before the reform, there were only 2 men, one driven by fear, the other standing for truth, and the sound of a single shot echoing through a city that had heard it all before. The command cut through the mist again. "On your knees, now!" Sharp, brittle, and trembling at the edges. Officer Ryan Caldwell's voice carried that dangerous mix of fear and authority that too often precedes disaster. The early light of Lincoln Park caught the edge of his badge and the black metal of his service weapon. Across from him, Marcus Ellis didn't move. He kept his hands visible, calm, controlled. The air between them felt heavy. Pulsing with history neither man had written, but both were trapped inside. Marcus had faced worse, in darker places, with men who didn't speak his language but still carried the same look in their eyes. Fear pretending to be power. Caldwell's heart raced, but his mind was louder. His training officer's words looped over and over. If in doubt, act first, apologize later. He'd been hearing it since the academy, since long before that. His father's ghost whispering the same creed. Ryan wanted to believe he was different. Better than the man who had been fired for brutality and died before redemption found him. But standing there, gun drawn on a stranger who looked too calm for his liking, he felt that same poison moving through his blood. "Sir, I'm with the FBI," Marcus said. His voice was even, deliberate, as though he were speaking to a frightened child. "My name is Special Agent Marcus Ellis. You're interfering with an active federal investigation. Caldwell's laugh came out wrong, short, broken. Disbelief twisted into mockery. Yeah, and I'm the mayor. You think I'm gonna fall for that? Marcus didn't flinch. You don't need to believe me. Just verify it. My credentials are in my left pocket. Check them, slowly. But Caldwell wasn't listening. He saw the calm in Marcus's eyes as provocation. He saw confidence as threat. Every headline about federal oversight, every rumor about rats in the department, every whisper about CPD officers being watched, it all pressed against his skull until the truth disappeared under the weight of suspicion. His body tensed the way it had been trained to. He believed he was taking control. Hands on the hood, Caldwell ordered. Now. Marcus shook his head slightly. That would be an unlawful order. Officer, I'm not resisting. I'm asserting my rights. Caldwell's teeth clenched. He heard rights as defiance. He saw the refusal not as a statement of law, but as a challenge. The quiet street, the fog, the empty park benches. It all vanished from his awareness. Only Marcus remained, a fixed point in a tunnel of noise. His grip tightened. Clara Benson, still on her balcony above, whispered to herself, "Oh no, don't you do this." Her phone trembled in her hand. She had started recording the moment Caldwell raised his gun. What she saw through the lens terrified her. 2 men, 10 yards apart, one trembling with fear, the other standing still with dignity. Marcus took a breath. Steady, controlled. Officer, I'm reaching for nothing. My badge is visible. You're making a mistake you can't take back. Caldwell's voice cracked. Don't tell me what mistake looks like. He stepped forward, the muzzle of his gun rising slightly, his other hand dropping toward the baton at his side. Last warning. Marcus met his gaze. You're escalating. This isn't training. This is real. Caldwell's baton came free with a metallic snap. He swung. The movement was clumsy, fueled by panic rather than skill. Marcus stepped back, lifted his arm, and deflected. The baton struck his forearm with a dull crack. Pain flashed across his face, but he didn't retaliate. I said stop! Marcus shouted. His voice carried authority, not anger. You're assaulting a federal officer! That word, federal, sent a jolt through Caldwell's body for a half second. His eyes widened, confusion breaking through the haze. Then pride filled the space where reason should have been. Federal? You think that scares me? He raised the baton again. The second swing caught Marcus's shoulder. He stumbled, caught himself, and raised both hands higher. You're out of control, he said quietly. I'm not your enemy. Caldwell's breath came fast, shallow. Sweat beaded along his neck. Drop to your knees. No. The single syllable was enough to break what little control Caldwell had left. His gun rose again. Down, or I swear. Or you'll what? Marcus said. The words were quiet, almost sorrowful. You'll do what your father did? That line cut through the fog like lightning. For a moment, Caldwell froze, his arm wavered. What did you just say? I said this doesn't end the way you think. Marcus replied, You still have a choice. Caldwell's eyes darted between Marcus's steady face and the phone above them recording it all. He saw the glint of the camera lens and felt the shame before the act was even complete. Delete that, he shouted at Clara. Ma'am, delete that video now. Clara's voice trembled but held firm. I will not. You're going too far. Caldwell turned back toward Marcus, the world spinning around him. The gun shook in his hand. I said get on your knees. Marcus stood his ground. I will not kneel for what's wrong. The silence that followed was short, but endless. Caldwell's finger brushed the trigger. The shot exploded into the air, a warning meant to scare but loud enough to terrify. The bullet struck a brick wall behind Marcus, splintering fragments into the fog. One shard flew upward, slicing across Clara's arm. She gasped, but didn't stop recording. "Ryan!" a voice shouted from down the street. It was Officer Elena Vargas. Sprinting toward them, uniform half-fastened, eyes wide with disbelief. "What the hell are you doing?" Caldwell spun toward her, disoriented. "He's not who he says he is. He's... Put it down!" Vargas commanded, gun holstered, hands out. "That's Agent Marcus Ellis. I met him at the Joint Task Force meeting last month." Caldwell blinked, confusion swallowing him. He's FBI?" "Yes. You just fired a weapon at a federal agent." The sound of approaching sirens filled the distance now. Vargas stepped between them, her body square, her voice steady. "Drop the weapon before you lose everything." Caldwell's arm lowered, slow, hesitant, the metal shaking as it fell toward the ground. He looked at Marcus, then at Vargas, then at his own hands as if seeing them for the first time. Sergeant Jamal Thompson arrived seconds later, his SUV screeching to a halt. He jumped out, took one look at the scene, and felt his stomach drop. "Tell me that didn't just happen," he said quietly. "It's a misunderstanding," Caldwell muttered, voice small now, all the authority gone. Thompson looked at Marcus, at the bullet mark in the wall, at Clara bleeding slightly but still filming. He turned back to Caldwell. "No, son, that wasn't a misunderstanding. That was 4 minutes that'll follow you for the rest of your life." By the time more units arrived, the block was lined with flashing lights and murmuring neighbors. The video was already uploading, within hours. It would spread beyond the neighborhood, beyond Chicago, beyond anything the department could contain, and in the quiet between sirens and statements. Marcus Ellis stood still beneath the gray sky, his arm throbbing, his heart steady. He knew the next fight would not be on a street. It would be in a courtroom, where truth moves slower, but cuts just as deep. The moment the shot cracked through Lincoln Park, the city's quiet morning vanished. The sound rolled through the trees, startled birds from their branches, and left an echo that hung heavy in the air. Ryan Caldwell's hands shook so violently that his gun rattled against his belt holster as he fumbled to resecure it. The bullet hadn't hit anyone, but the noise itself had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Marcus Ellis stood frozen, his forearm stinging from the baton strike, his shoulder tight from where the second swing had landed. He could smell the burnt powder in the air. He could feel the tremor of adrenaline coursing through him, the same kind he'd learned to master overseas. But this wasn't combat. This was home. This was supposed to be safe. Elena Vargas had seen shootings before, but never like this. Never where the shooter's hands trembled as if trying to erase the act by shaking it away. She ran forward, hand up, voice firm. "Ryan, holster your weapon, now!" Her words hit like a slap. Caldwell blinked. Lost. The fog in his head thicker than the one surrounding the park. Vargas grabbed his wrist, yanked the gun downward, and twisted it free before he could object. "You almost killed him," she hissed. "Do you understand what you just did?" Marcus steadied himself. He fired a live round. "You can see the impact on that wall." His tone was calm, but the restraint behind it was visible. He didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He didn't move closer. He'd seen what happened when adrenaline collided with a badge. Sergeant Jamal Thompson stepped out of his SUV, breath quick, his face unreadable. He scanned the scene, the officer, the agent, the woman on the balcony still filming through a bloodied towel. "What happened?" he demanded. Vargas didn't answer right away. She was still breathing hard, trying to keep Caldwell from collapsing under the weight of what he'd done. "He didn't listen," Marcus said quietly. "He ordered me to kneel, swung a baton, then fired, all within 4 minutes." Thompson's eyes closed for a brief second. He had seen plenty of bad calls in his career, but this one was personal. Caldwell wasn't just any rookie. He was his responsibility. "Officer Caldwell," he said carefully, "do you have any idea who this man is?" Caldwell's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His voice finally cracked, low and unsteady. He said he was FBI. I thought he was lying." "You thought," Thompson repeated, voice rising. "And because you thought, you almost killed a federal agent?" He turned to Vargas. "Secure the weapon, take his statement, and get that footage from the witness before she disappears." Clara Benson, bleeding from her arm but steady in her stance, shouted down, "I'm not going anywhere. I've got the whole thing on video." Her voice wavered between anger and disbelief. "He threatened me too. Told me to delete it." "Mrs. Benson, keep that phone safe," Marcus said gently. "That recording may be the only thing that tells the truth." Backup arrived within minutes. 2 cruisers, 4 officers, and a flood of flashing blue and red lights bouncing off the wet brick. A medic approached Clara, wrapped her arm, and tried to coax her inside, but she refused to leave. "Not till someone writes this down right," she muttered. The street became a maze of orders, confusion, and shame. Caldwell sat on the curb, face pale, hands clasped together. His mind was unraveling, memories of the academy lectures on escalation, the body cam reviews, the endless training sessions on restraint, all of it colliding with the ugly realization that he had done everything wrong. Vargas stepped aside to radio dispatch. "Shots fired. No injuries. Federal agent on scene. Request FBI liaison immediately." Those words sent a chill through everyone within earshot. Federal meant investigation. Federal meant accountability. Marcus pressed a hand to his shoulder, grimacing. "You should call the Bureau's Chicago field office. They'll be expecting me." Thompson nodded, pulling out his phone. "Agent Ellis, I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Don't," Marcus interrupted softly. "You didn't pull the trigger." But the guilt spread like smoke. Vargas looked down at Caldwell, who now seemed smaller than his uniform allowed him to be. He whispered to himself, "I didn't mean to. I just wanted him to listen." "You fired a gun in a residential neighborhood," Vargas said flatly. "You're lucky no one's dead." Caldwell looked up at her, eyes glassy. "You think I don't know that?" By the time the FBI vehicles arrived, 2 black SUVs, windows tinted, the story had already started to travel. Someone had uploaded Clara's video online. The title read, "Chicago Cop Pulls Gun on Black Man in Lincoln Park." Within 15 minutes, it had 3,000 views. Within an hour, a local journalist tweeted it. By noon, the footage would be on national television. Special Agent in Charge Victor Langford stepped out of the lead SUV, his jaw tight, his suit immaculate despite the chaos. He approached Marcus directly, ignoring the uniforms around them. "You all right?" "I'll live," Marcus said. "But this city's going to feel that bullet for a long time." Langford turned toward Caldwell, who was being escorted into a cruiser for his own protection. "Name?" "Officer Ryan Caldwell," Thompson said reluctantly. 3 months out of the academy." Langford nodded slowly. 3 months, and he almost started a federal crisis. Marcus took a step closer to Caldwell, not out of anger but something deeper, a kind of sorrow. "You looked right at my badge," he said quietly. "You saw who I was. You just couldn't believe it." Caldwell's lip quivered. "I didn't know what to believe anymore." Langford signaled to his team. "Take statements, every word, every detail. Pull body cam footage from every officer here." Thompson hesitated. "About that?" Langford frowned. "What?" "There's a gap," Thompson said carefully. Caldwell's body cam dropped for 47 seconds. It reconnected after the shot. Langford's expression darkened. Convenient. He looked to Marcus. We'll recover it. Digital forensics never forgets. The block was sealed off by mid-morning. Reporters began gathering near the yellow tape. Clara's bandaged arm was visible as she gave a shaky statement to a young detective. Her voice cracked as she said, "He told me to delete the video, said he'd find a reason to arrest me. I told him I'd find a reason to remember." By late afternoon, the hashtag Lincoln Park Incident had begun trending. Protesters gathered outside the 18th District headquarters, holding signs that read, "Accountability is not optional." Traffic slowed, news helicopters circled, and talk radio filled with divided voices, some defending the rookie, others condemning the pattern. Inside the station, Caldwell sat alone in an interview room, staring at his reflection in the glass. Every few seconds, he rubbed his hands together as though trying to wash off something invisible. He didn't speak when Internal Affairs entered. He didn't look up when Sergeant Thompson walked in to place his badge and weapon on the table. Outside, Marcus Ellis walked toward an ambulance, jacket draped over his arm, shoulder wrapped. Vargas joined him halfway. "You handled yourself better than anyone else would have," she said quietly. Marcus gave a faint, weary smile. "It's not the first time I've had a gun pointed at me. But it should have been the last." Vargas nodded, her eyes heavy. "You think this video will change anything?" "It'll change someone," Marcus said. "That's how it starts." As he stepped into the back of the ambulance, he looked once more toward Caldwell through the window. There was no hatred in his eyes, just a silent recognition of how quickly fear can erase judgment. That night, as the footage played on screens across Chicago, the city's leaders scrambled to respond. Statements were drafted, lawyers briefed, and the mayor's office called for calm. But the truth was already loose, living on phones, headlines, and hearts. The bullet hadn't hit anyone, but the wound it left was wide open, and everyone, from the rookie to the bureau to the city itself, was bleeding from it. By the time the sun rose over the Chicago skyline, the video had already spread faster than the police department could contain it. The clip, 43 seconds long, shaky but unmistakable, showed Officer Ryan Caldwell shouting commands, a gun raised, and the deafening pop of a warning shot. Mrs. Clara Benson's frightened voice could be heard screaming, "He's FBI!" before the screen cut off. That was all it took. The city was awake, furious, and demanding answers. At headquarters, phones rang nonstop. By 8 o'clock, the superintendent's inbox was overflowing with media requests, while the mayor's office issued a bland statement calling the footage deeply concerning inside the 18th District. No one knew what to say. Everyone knew what had happened, but no one wanted to say it aloud. Ryan Caldwell sat alone in the locker room, staring at the empty space where his badge had been taken hours earlier. His uniform shirt lay crumpled beside him, its fabric still damp from the early morning mist. He replayed the sound of that gunshot again and again. Each echo felt louder than the last. He wanted to tell himself it wasn't his fault, that fear had taken over, that he had followed instinct. But the more he thought about it, the more hollow it sounded. When the door opened, Sergeant Jamal Thompson stepped in, his expression grim. "Internal Affairs wants your statement," he said. "They'll want it word for word." Caldwell nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "Sarge," he whispered, "I didn't mean for it to go that far." Thompson's jaw tightened. "Meaning doesn't fix the hole in the wall, or the fact that every news outlet in the country is calling for your head." He paused. "You need to understand what's coming. This isn't just a suspension. The Bureau's involved now." Across town, Marcus Ellis lay on a hospital gurney at Northwestern Memorial, a thin bandage on his shoulder and another wrapped around his bruised forearm. He had refused sedation, refused rest. He just wanted to talk to the Bureau's liaison and make sure the footage was secure. When Agent Victor Lang arrived, Marcus was already reviewing the preliminary transcript of his own statement. "You don't have to work today," Lang said quietly. "You were assaulted by a uniformed officer. You're the victim here." Marcus shook his head. "No, I'm a witness. And if we don't move fast, they'll bury this before lunchtime." Lang looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You're not wrong." He handed Marcus a tablet. "The video's authentic, metadata matches, but the CPD body cam has a 47-second blackout, right when the gun went off." Marcus sighed. "So they'll call it a malfunction." Lang's mouth twitched into a bitter half-smile. "They always do." At police headquarters, Superintendent Patricia Monroe convened an emergency meeting behind closed doors. Around the table sat her deputy chiefs, legal counsel, and internal affairs director Robert Stein. The mood was tense, brittle, like glass ready to break. Monroe adjusted her glasses, tapping a pen against the folder marked Incident 2-1478-LP. "We're keeping this internal," she said firmly. "No press statements until the investigation's complete." Stein frowned. "With respect, Chief, that video is already public. Trying to contain it will only make us look like we're hiding something." Monroe's tone sharpened. "We are containing it because the city's on edge. If this spirals, we'll have riots before nightfall." One of the deputy chiefs leaned forward. "Ma'am, the feds are calling this assault on a federal officer." Monroe's eyes flicked toward him. "Then we cooperate. On paper, off paper, we manage our own." Meanwhile, Sergeant Thompson sat at his desk, staring at a printed still frame from the video. Caldwell mid-motion, gun raised. The outline of Marcus Ellis frozen in disbelief. Thompson's stomach twisted. He knew this was bigger than one officer's mistake, for weeks. Whispers had spread through the department about mob payoffs and clean routes near Lincoln Park. Caldwell had overheard things he shouldn't have. Thompson had heard them too, but said nothing. He told himself it was for his daughter, whose cancer treatments depended on his health insurance. But silence, he realized now, was its own kind of crime. Caldwell was called into the interrogation room just before noon. 2 IA investigators sat across from him, recorders running. "Officer Caldwell, describe the incident," one said. His voice trembled as he spoke. "I saw a man taking pictures of a marked unit. I approached him. He refused to comply, claimed he was FBI. I thought he was lying." "Did he identify himself with credentials?" the investigator asked. "Yes, but anyone can print a badge," Caldwell muttered. "I followed procedure." The second investigator leaned forward. "Procedure doesn't include firing your weapon at an unarmed man who's showing you ID." Caldwell swallowed hard. "It was a warning shot. I didn't aim at him." "You still pulled the trigger," the man said flatly. "You're on administrative leave without pay, pending investigation." Outside the building, protesters began gathering before sunset. The first signs were handwritten. "Justice for Marcus Ellis," by evening. The crowd stretched half a block, chanting under the flashing news cameras. Thompson stood at the window, watching them. "It's starting," he murmured. Vargas joined him. "It's been starting for years," she said. "This just lit the fuse." That same night, in a small downtown apartment, Derek Hale, the training officer who had once mentored Caldwell, sat watching the footage on repeat. His wife asked him to turn it off, but he didn't. He saw himself in that rookie's panic, in that blind certainty that authority made you right. But what caught his attention wasn't the gunshot. It was the flicker on the corner of the screen, the moment the body cam feed froze. He opened his laptop, accessed the department's cloud drive, and downloaded the data log. The blackout wasn't random. It had been manually interrupted. Someone had toggled override on Caldwell's device less than a minute before the shot. Hale exhaled, staring at the timestamp. "They're going to cover it up," he said quietly. His wife looked at him, uneasy. "What are you going to do?" He didn't answer. He simply copied the file onto a USB drive and slipped it into his jacket pocket. By midnight, the FBI's digital forensics team confirmed the tampering. Lang called Marcus immediately. "You were right," he said. "The blackout wasn't a glitch. Someone tried to delete that moment." Marcus's voice was steady. "Then we've got intent. Get it to the DOJ." Lang hesitated. "You sure? That'll start a war with CPD." "It's already started," Marcus replied. "We're just shining a light on it." Back at headquarters, Superintendent Monroe issued her final order of the night. "No one talks to the press," she said. "We handle our own people. The public wants heads to roll. We'll give them a suspension, not a scandal." But outside her office door, a young communications officer was already streaming live updates to a reporter friend, whispering every word. The story was too big to bury. By dawn, national networks had picked it up. Headlines scrolled across every screen. "Chicago officer fires on federal agent. Video sparks investigation." The Department of Justice announced an inquiry into both the shooting and the CPD's internal oversight inside the station. Officers walked on eggshells, afraid of who might be wearing a wire. Caldwell's locker was emptied out. Thompson's conscience was unraveling. Hale waited for the right moment to send his evidence. And Marcus Ellis, standing at his apartment window overlooking Lake Michigan, understood that the bullet had missed his body but struck something far larger. The illusion that silence could protect anyone. The cover-up had begun, but so had the reckoning. The civil complaint landed on the federal clerk's desk just after dawn, thick as a dictionary and heavier in meaning. The front page read, "Ellis v. City of Chicago, et al. A $10 million suit alleging assault, civil rights violations, and malicious negligence. Attorney Victor Lang, the civil rights litigator with the gray temples and courtroom calm of a man who'd been here too many times before. Filed it himself, within hours. Every newsroom in the country had the same image on screen. Marcus Ellis stepping onto the courthouse steps, arm still in a sling, flanked by his wife Lena and Clara Benson, the woman whose phone had captured the 43 seconds that shook Chicago. Flashbulbs lit their faces like lightning. Lang didn't make a speech. He didn't have to. The filing spoke louder than any microphone could. Its words cut like law was meant to. Clear, steady, and without apology. Inside the CPD headquarters, Superintendent Patricia Monroe was unraveling. For 2 weeks, she'd faced reporters, protesters, and nightly drone footage of angry crowds surrounding the 18th District. Her officers were exhausted. Her command staff was split between loyalty and fear. She'd offered apologies on television, but none of them landed. She knew what the lawsuit meant. It wasn't just about one officer's mistake. It was about a culture that had been left to rot behind a blue wall that no one dared to breach. 10 million, she muttered under her breath as she scanned the morning brief. We'll be lucky if it stops there. Across from her, Deputy Chief Harold Rivera spoke softly. You can't out-talk this one, Pat. Not with body cams blacking out and FBI files on the table. The DOJ is watching. She sighed. Then maybe it's time to stop talking. Across the city, Sergeant Jamal Thompson sat in his kitchen long after midnight, unable to sleep. His daughter's hospital bills lay open beside him. He'd been quiet for too long, about the bribes, the falsified overtime, the protection fees that kept certain street routes clear for the mob-connected haulers. He'd told himself he was keeping the peace, protecting his family. But now the peace had cracked open. He could see Caldwell's terrified face every time he closed his eyes. That rookie hadn't just panicked. He'd been poisoned by the same silence Thompson had helped create. When the FBI knocked on his door the next morning, he was ready. He sat across from two agents, one of them Langford, the other a younger woman with sharp eyes and a notepad. "Sergeant Thompson," Langford said, "you understand that lying today will cost you your badge and your pension, but telling the truth might save a city." Thompson nodded. "Then it's time I start talking." He confessed everything: the bribes, the threats, the way certain officers were told to look away when trucks ran their routes. But what caught Langford's attention wasn't the corruption itself. It was a single sentence buried in Thompson's account. Caldwell wasn't acting on his own. The room went still. "What do you mean?" the younger agent asked. "I mean, someone told him that morning that the Bureau was planting fake agents to bait cops. Told him to be proactive. He said it came from his training officer, Derek Hale." Langford frowned. "That's a serious claim?" "It's a true one," Thompson replied. "Caldwell bragged about it in the locker room," said Hale told him. "If they hesitate, make them comply. The department rewards initiative." Langford leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You're saying his FTO trained him to overreact?" "I'm saying his FTO trained him not to think," Thompson said quietly. That afternoon, Marcus Ellis and his attorney met with DOJ officials in a windowless conference room at the Dirksen Federal Building. The walls hummed with quiet intensity, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Lang spread out a line of evidence: Clara's raw video, Hale's recovered USB file showing the body cam override, and Thompson's signed statement. "This isn't about one gun," Lang said. "It's about a system that taught a man to fear instead of discern." The federal lawyers nodded. One of them, a woman named Rebecca Hahn, flipped through the file. "The pattern fits. Training logs show Hale ignored 3 bias reports, and Caldwell's evaluation note said he needs improvement in restraint. That was ignored. 2. Lang looked toward Marcus, who sat silent, his hands folded. "You ready for a fight that won't be short?" Marcus nodded once. "I've been fighting since I put on a uniform at 21. This time it's just on different soil." Meanwhile, at a quiet cafe near Lakeview, Clara Benson and Dr. Lena Ellis sat across from each other for the first time without cameras or reporters. The old woman's arm was still wrapped in gauze. Lena's hands trembled slightly from lack of sleep. "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. "I wish I'd filmed longer. Maybe it would have helped." Lena shook her head. "You did more than anyone else would have." "Without you, they'd have buried him as an aggressor," Clara sighed. "When he shouted FBI, I thought that would stop it. But it didn't. That man looked right through me when I tried to speak." Lena's eyes glistened. "That's the part that hurts the most. Not the shot, not the baton, the disbelief. Like no matter what he said, it would never be enough." They sat in silence for a long time before Lena added, "My son asked me why the police hurt Daddy. I didn't know what to tell him." Clara reached across the table, her weathered hand resting on hers. "Tell him some people get lost in fear, but tell him others keep walking through it. Your husband's one of those." Back in the federal courthouse, Lang prepared for the pretrial conference. CPD's lawyers tried to argue the usual lines: split-second judgment, unclear identification, stress-induced reaction. But this time, the evidence spoke louder. The 47-second blackout showed manual tampering. Hale's voice recording, recovered from his laptop, captured him telling recruits, "Act first, sort later. No one ever got fired for being decisive." The courtroom fell silent when the recording played. Judge Amelia Harper, known for her precision and memory for faces, looked directly at the city's legal counsel and said, "That statement is why we're here." The next morning, Hale was subpoenaed. He arrived pale, sweating and defensive, under oath. He tried to distance himself, claiming. Those were just training jokes, but Lang didn't let him breathe. You think teaching a rookie to act first, apologize later is funny? Hale swallowed. It's a figure of speech. Lang leaned forward. No, Officer Hale, it's a confession. Outside the courthouse, the crowds grew larger. Signs called for accountability, reform, and justice. News anchors replayed the body cam footage beside Marcus's photograph, comparing the two images as symbols of what America still wrestled with. But for Marcus, none of it felt like victory. The attention was noise. The truth was what mattered. He told reporters once, I didn't sue for money. I sued to make sure the next man with a badge doesn't see my son as a threat. As the discovery phase continued, Thompson's cooperation led to the suspension of 12 officers tied to the mob bribery ring. The mayor's office panicked, demanding damage control. Chief Monroe tried to resign quietly, but the governor refused to accept it, insisting she stay to oversee reforms. Public trust was collapsing by the hour. Late one night, Lang visited Marcus at home. He handed him a file marked Confidential, Settlement Proposal. Inside was an offer, $3.5 million total, $2 million for Marcus, $1 million for a community justice fund, and $500,000 personally against Caldwell. Marcus read it in silence. It's not about the number, Lang said. It's about acknowledgement. Marcus nodded slowly. If we take it, does it end? Lang hesitated. Legally, yes, but morally, no. This only ends when the system changes. Marcus looked toward the window, where city lights flickered against the dark waters of Lake Michigan. Then I'll take it, he said quietly, but not as payment, as evidence. That same night, Jamal Thompson called Langford one last time. There's one more thing, he said. A name you didn't ask for. Langford frowned. Whose? Thompson exhaled. The one who paid for the body cam override. Someone higher up wanted it gone. Who? Langford pressed. The line went silent for a moment. Then Thompson whispered. Chief Monroe's deputy. The call ended abruptly. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, echoing across a restless city. Inside a manila envelope at the DOJ office sat a signed affidavit that would soon unravel Chicago's most protected secret. The proof that the cover-up had come from the top. The lawsuit had started as one man's stand against fear, but it was about to become something bigger, a reckoning that no settlement could silence. The trial opened under gray Chicago skies, the kind that seemed to hang just low enough to listen. Inside the Dirksen Federal Courthouse, every seat was filled. Reporters, law students, police officers, and ordinary citizens who had seen the viral clip that brought them all here. On one side sat Marcus Ellis, shoulders straight, his wife Lena beside him. On the other sat Ryan Caldwell, pale and hollow-eyed, wearing the same Navy suit he'd bought for the academy graduation. Between them lay a silence that felt older than either man, a silence born from decades of mistrust and fear. Judge Amelia Harper presided, her voice steady but her eyes sharp. This is not just a case about one officer and one agent, she said in her opening statement. It is a case about the weight of power and what happens when fear replaces judgment. Victor Lang began the plaintiff's case with surgical precision. He walked to the center of the courtroom, holding up a simple printout of the 43-second video. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, this is not a question of confusion. It is a question of conditioning. He played the video once, without sound, letting the image of Caldwell's trembling gun fill the projection screen. The courtroom was silent, except for the faint whir of the playback. When it ended, Lang looked toward the jury. You saw a man doing his job, and another man seeing a threat where there was none. This wasn't instinct, it was learned. Clara Benson was the first to testify. Her voice shook at first, but her resolve grew as she recounted that morning. The sound of the command, the fear in Marcus's voice, and the echo of the shot that cut through her balcony flowers. "He looked through me," she said, her voice catching, "like I wasn't even there, like the truth in front of him didn't matter." When Lang asked why she kept recording even after being threatened, she answered simply, "Because silence lets things like this keep happening." The jury nodded. One of the reporters in the back wiped away a tear. Next came Dr. Lena Ellis, poised but trembling with quiet strength. She described how her 10-year-old son had hidden behind the couch the night the video aired, asking, "Mom, did they shoot Daddy?" Her voice cracked. "How do you explain to a child that their father was almost killed for doing his job?" she asked. The courtroom was still. Even Caldwell's defense attorney lowered his eyes. "He didn't want a lawsuit," she continued. "He wanted accountability. He wanted the system that almost took him to see what it had become." When Derek Hale took the stand, the air grew colder. The man who once trained Ryan Caldwell shifted in his seat, sweat darkening his collar. Lang approached him slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "Officer Hale," he began, "you were this young man's field training officer. Do you recall using the phrase, 'if in doubt, act first, apologize later'?" Hale hesitated. "That was taken out of context." "Then give us the context." Lang pressed. Hale swallowed hard. It was about staying alert, being decisive." Lang leaned closer. "No, it was about fear. You taught a man to mistake fear for control. You told him hesitation was weakness, and it nearly killed an innocent agent. Do you deny that?" Hale's face went slack. "No," he whispered. "I don't." Gasps filled the room. Judge Harper's gavel came down, but her expression betrayed quiet agreement. Caldwell's defense tried to paint him as overwhelmed, a rookie under pressure. His lawyer spoke of stress, training deficiencies, and years of departmental neglect. But Marcus's cross-examination undid it all when asked if he blamed Caldwell personally. Marcus shook his head. "No, I blame what shaped him, but every man still chooses where to stand." Caldwell looked up at him then, eyes red, jaw trembling. For the first time since that morning, he whispered, "I'm sorry." It wasn't loud enough for the jury to hear, but Marcus did. He gave a slow nod, not of forgiveness, but of recognition, in her closing remarks. Judge Harper spoke not as an arbiter, but as a witness to history. "This city has seen too many mornings like that one," she said. "We cannot call them isolated when they form a pattern. We cannot call them accidents when the same training, the same fear, the same silence keeps repeating." She turned toward the jury. "This is not about one bad officer. This is about what happens when an institution forgets that the badge is not armor. It is responsibility." After 6 hours of deliberation, the verdict was unanimous. The city of Chicago was found liable for assault, civil rights violations, and negligent supervision. The total judgment, $3.5 million, $2 million to Marcus Ellis, $1 million to a public fund for police community reform, and $500,000 personally against Ryan Caldwell. The jury foreman, an older black veteran, read the decision aloud with quiet gravity. Caldwell lowered his head into his hands. Lena Ellis wept softly. Marcus didn't smile, didn't speak. He just exhaled, as if releasing 4 years of weight from his chest. Outside, the courthouse steps overflowed with reporters and citizens chanting for reform. Cameras flashed as Marcus addressed the crowd briefly. "I didn't want revenge," he said. "I wanted recognition. What happened that morning was not an accident. It was a mirror. We all need to look at what it reflects." Inside, Judge Harper remained at her bench long after the courtroom had emptied. She watched the light fade through the tall windows and whispered to her clerk, "We didn't just try a case today. We tried a conscience." And somewhere across the city, as the headlines rolled and the chants echoed through the streets, Ryan Caldwell sat alone in his apartment, replaying every decision, every second, every echo of the shot that had changed everything. Justice had been served, but the cost of learning it had been carved into them all. The verdict settled over Chicago like a long, exhausted sigh. For the first time in months, the courthouse steps were quiet. Reporters packed their cameras, protesters folded their signs, and the echo of chants faded into the hum of late-afternoon traffic. Inside the marble hall, Marcus Ellis stood beneath the rotunda, the same black sling still across his shoulder. His wife Lena joined him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "It's over," she whispered. Marcus gave a faint nod. "No," he said softly. "It's just written down now." The judgment, $3.5 million, was more than a number. It was an acknowledgement that the city had looked in its own mirror and finally seen the truth. $2 million went to Marcus for damages, $1 million to a community reform fund in his name, and $500,000 personally from Ryan Caldwell. But the money wasn't what mattered. The meaning was. For the first time, Chicago had been forced to admit that fear could no longer pass for protection. Ryan Caldwell left the courthouse through a side door, his suit jacket draped over one arm, his face pale under the harsh sunlight. The once confident rookie was gone. What remained was a man hollowed out by guilt. The department had fired him 2 months earlier. He'd spent most nights in silence, drifting between his sister's couch and a half-empty apartment where the blinds stayed closed. His wife had filed for divorce. The news had replayed his face so often that strangers recognized him in the grocery store. Some spat at him, others looked away. When reporters tried to speak to him that night, he said only one sentence: "I thought I was doing what I was trained to do." He didn't appear at the press conference. He didn't call his lawyer. By the end of the week, he was working night security at a mall on the South Side. $15 an hour. Flashlight on his hip. His gun license revoked every time he passed a mirror. He caught his reflection and turned away. At headquarters, reform was no longer optional. Superintendent Patricia Monroe, under federal supervision, announced sweeping changes. The field training program expanded from 14 to 24 weeks, mandatory 40-hour bias training for every officer, and a citywide policy requiring body cams to live stream directly to a neutral oversight server. "No more dark corners," she told reporters. "If a camera goes silent again, someone goes to prison." The DOJ approved a compliance monitor, and for the first time in years, the community council had a seat at the command table. Jamal Thompson, who had once buried his guilt beneath silence, was reassigned to lead the new integrity unit. He accepted it not as redemption, but as duty. "I can't fix what I ignored," he said in his first meeting, "but I can make sure no one else looks away." Derek Hale's confession destroyed what was left of the old guard. His admission that he'd preached "act first, apologize later" to rookies became a turning point in the department's training overhaul. Internal Affairs opened a dozen cases linked to his oversight, and several officers quietly resigned before charges came. Hale himself left the city, relocating to a small town in Wisconsin, where he lived under another name. Decisive, he once told recruits, was the mark of a good cop. Now he understood that decisiveness without discernment was just another form of ignorance. The public fund, named the Ellis Initiative for Justice and Community Reform, was launched 6 months later. It provided scholarships for young officers from underrepresented neighborhoods and therapy programs for veterans struggling with PTSD. Marcus refused to take credit. "I didn't create this," he told a journalist during the ribbon cutting. "Payne did." The first recipient of the scholarship was a 19-year-old from Englewood who wanted to become a detective, to prove trust and justice can live in the same room. Ryan Caldwell attended one meeting of the initiative in secret. Sitting in the back of a crowded community center, no one recognized him, though one older woman whispered that he looked familiar when Marcus spoke from the stage. Accountability isn't punishment, it's medicine. Caldwell lowered his head. For a moment, he wanted to stand and apologize, but the words caught in his throat. He stayed until the end, then slipped out quietly into the night. Later that year, he tried to rebuild his life, therapy, odd jobs, sobriety. But some wounds, especially the self-inflicted kind, refused to close cleanly for Marcus Ellis. Life moved on with quiet steadiness. The Bureau reinstated him with full honors, though he declined a promotion. Titles don't fix systems, he said. Truth does. He spent most days advising young recruits and lecturing at police academies about implicit bias and restraint. In private moments, though, he still woke in the night to the sound of that warning shot, the smell of gunpowder lingering in his dreams. Lena understood. Sometimes she would find him standing by the window before dawn, watching the city lights flicker across the lake. "You okay?" she'd ask. He would nod. Almost. On the first anniversary of the verdict, Marcus returned to Lincoln Park. The fog was the same, the quiet the same. But the world felt different. A small bronze plaque had been installed near the spot where it happened. It read, "Here." Fear met accountability, and the truth stood its ground. He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, listening to the faint rustle of leaves behind him. Children played near the fountain, their laughter cutting through the stillness. He smiled faintly. "That's how you know the city's healing," he said to himself. As the light dimmed, he walked toward the statue of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., near the edge of the park. The sky turned gold over the lake. Standing there, he whispered the same words he had said after the trial. "I wanted change, not cash. We got both. But at what cost?" He touched the edge of the plaque, then turned away, somewhere across the city. A rookie officer began his first shift under a new code, one written in the shadow of that morning's mistake, and for the first time in a long time. Chicago exhaled, not in triumph, but in understanding. Justice had come, imperfect and human, but real. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, please subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone who still believes change is possible. Your voice keeps these stories alive.